Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and today's guest is very special. I brought him on the show because I'm hoping to get free booze from him in the future. So this interview was a part of that journey, and I only say that in joking. But today's guest, I met him at Military Creator Con. If you're not sure what that is, check it out, militarycreatorcon.com. It was an amazing conference. This year was the first year. Got to meet a lot of amazing service members and their loved ones and supporting members and different nonprofits and companies. Basically, all veterans and active duty creatives trying to make great things, trying to have impact in the civilian world post service. So it was amazing. Today's guest was one of those gentlemen that I met. And we talked throughout the whole thing, and we had a couple great conversations, and he even got to attend me speaking on stage. So super grateful for his support and excited to talk a little bit about all the stuff he learned. A fellow podcaster, a veteran, and just a great guy. And he might as well be called Mr. Whiskey as well from what he plans to be doing, which we'll get into that. So, Louis Famiglietti, so great to have you here. And I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and then go into kind of why you joined the military. The big question we always want to know, why did you join? When did you join? And we'll get into it from there.
Awesome. Mr. Whiskey, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time. It's a testament to how good Military Creator Con is and how exciting it is that here we are following up, like actually following up and having a podcast. And I'm so appreciative. So thank you very much. It was great meeting you. And so I'm an Air Force retiree, spent 21 years in the Air Force. Everyone knows the best career field in the Air Force is aircraft weapons systems. So I was a weapons troop. And when I got out, I went to work for a Fortune 500 aerospace industry. I was pretty proud of myself. I did exactly what I wanted to do. And after a couple of years, I started to get an itch, like something didn't feel right. I decided I was going to start a podcast. I had no idea about podcasting. And the first person I met was James VP, James Van Proyen, who him and his wife Mara were the ones who built Military Creator Con. And it was one of those happy accidents that James said, "Hey, I can help you get set up with a podcast." And so we tried that, and I have a couple different ideas for what I want my podcast to be. That it's changed a couple times, I think, and the more podcasters I talk to, the more I see that that's normal. And so now we're going to try and do. Me and my co-hosts are going to tour the country, and go to different distilleries and talk to people. I want to know the stories behind. Like you said, you want to know why I joined the military. I want to know why, because that is a great question, and it's usually one of those questions we always ask first. Why'd you join? I want to know. I've learned a couple things about the distilling industry. You're not doing it for the fame and glory, and you're not doing it for the money, and you're not doing it because it's easy. So if it's hard work, it doesn't pay a lot, and you're not going to get famous, then
Oh,
why
it
are you
sounds like the
doing it?
military.
Exactly, right? Like, yeah. So maybe that's just the same question asked to a different audience, really, is what it comes down to. So that's what I'm trying to do, and I appreciate you helping me kind of get my feet under me and accumulate some sort of traction and momentum.
Yes, sir. And so you talked about 21 years in the Air Force. We know it takes 20 years to retire, so you did one extra year. Now, for those who don't understand, in the Air Force, you don't actually work, right? That's why they call it the chair force. And so
Correct. Yeah.
you had to do at least 1 year of actual service before you left. So that's why you did the 21 years, correct?
Yeah, I felt like I kind of skated for 20 years. At least give you an extra year.
Right, right. No, that is amazing that you did 21 years. Like I said, it's always so mind-blowing to meet people who gave their whole life to the service. I met a gentleman at Military Creator Con who actually was about to retire at almost 30 years, and I
Mm.
think I think I had someone on the podcast who was over 34 years who would have
Wow.
done like 45 years. He got into political nonsense and unfortunately they kind of forced him to retire or it was going to be a headache. So it's a shame, but to think over 30 years, I mean, that just blows my mind. That's a whole lifetime. So, of course, we'll get into the question of why did you stay in that long, but we got to go back first to why did you join and when did you join?
I joined. I actually enlisted, like delayed entry, the December of my senior year in high school. I went to a small Catholic high school in Connecticut, and I was scheduled. I graduated 123 out of 125 kids, and I there was probably only 10 to 15 people who scored higher on their SATs than me. And it came down to I was the one kid that everyone always said, "Oh, you have so much potential, but you're not doing the work. You're not doing." I hated school. College wasn't for me. So Connecticut in the mid 90s was not it wasn't a booming economy. It was a tough place to be. And I understood I kind of had two paths in front of me. My father said, "You're at 18, you're leaving or you're working hard. You're doing something." So he had a job in construction lined up for me, or he'd promised that he would pay for my CDL. He was a truck driver. He said, "I'll pay for your CDL and I'll get you your first job, or at least your first interview." And my mother said, "No, I'm not going to raise another truck driver." And so my best friend one day, and this is literally how it happened, man. My best friend comes to school. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to be out tomorrow." "Why?" "I'm joining the Navy." "Well, crap. When did that happen?" "Yeah, I talked to the recruiter, and I'm going up to Massachusetts to do the physical and stuff. I'm going to join the Navy." Sure enough, the next day he was out of school. On Monday, I said, "Hey, how was your weekend?" "Yeah, I'm in. I joined the Navy." Ah, man. And this was, I had an uncle in the army in World War II, but none of my siblings had joined, and it wasn't really even on the radar. But I told my guidance counselor I was going to apply to the Air Force Academy, and he laughed at me. And he said, like, "I don't think you understand how the service academies work. You'd be lucky to get into the community college, let alone the service academy." So I said, "Well, maybe you're right. I'm not going to college. I don't want to go to college. Nick just joined the Navy. Let me go talk." So he brought me down to the Navy recruiter. And I actually just told a story the other day. We went to the Navy recruiter had a barbecue for the DEP program. The DEP program is the delayed entry program. So I go to the recruiter's house. He's got a nice barbecue. There's a bunch of sailors around, and they start talking stories about how long they'd each been on the ship for the longest. And oh, I was out for 6 months. I was out for 8, and some dude had been out for like 12 months or 14 months. And at the end of the barbecue, the recruiter was like, "Hey man, you gonna come down Monday and we'll talk?" I said, "No, no, sir. I'm done with the Navy. I'm not gonna be on a ship for 14 months or 12 months." He said, "Okay, well, you come talk to me and we'll see, but you're always welcome." In the meantime, I saw the Air Force recruiter, and this is when the Aim High marketing campaign was on. And when I sat down in front of the Air Force recruiter, he had like one of those 12-foot F-16s sitting behind him, like that took up the whole wall, and it was flying through and it had bombs and missiles hanging on it. And I said, "Hey, if I join the Air Force, can I work on that?" He was like, "Yep." And that was it. And then, of course, I found out the Air Force had 6 week basic training, and the Navy had 8, the Army had 10, and the Marines had 12. I was like, well, that kind of sealed the deal.
Right. It's funny because a lot of people who join the Navy, when we ask them, like, "Hey, why did you join the Navy?" Their answer was because the Air Force recruiting office was closed. Like it
Mm,
was always closed for lunch or a day off. And I'm actually the opposite of you in the sense that I originally was going Air Force. The day before I shipped out, they changed my job on me. In Army terms, MOS, and Navy terms,
yeah.
right? What I was going to do was photojournalism. That's what recruiter and I had talked about, had worked on for quite a while. And then he's like, "Actually, no, 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 no. You're going to be a crypto linguist and you're going to learn another language and you're going to spend
Wow.
sometimes up to 14 hours in a plane translating a foreign language." And it was kind of like
Mm,
your 14 months. I heard 14 hours in a plane. I'd never been in a
yeah.
plane in my life at that time. Boot camp was the first time I ever flew. So I
Yeah,
was like,
me
I'm not
too.
spending 14 hours in a
Yeah.
plane
No, that
translating.
sounds awful.
Right. And at the time, I didn't want to travel, learn another language. Now I regret it. Now I'm like, man, if I could have learned, but they probably didn't even have the languages I wanted, Greek, Hebrew, or, Japanese. They maybe had Aramaic, or Arabic. So it's adjacent enough, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, man, you had me with the photojournalism and all this and that. And then boom, you try to change my job on me the day before I shipped out to MEPS to finalize and sign the contract. He should have told me after. I should have signed the paperwork and then he was like, "Oh, actually, you're a crypto linguist." Because I've seen that before. I've seen plenty
Yeah.
of. terrible recruitment stuff, and especially like, oh, join the Navy, just be a boatswain's mate, and then you can cross rate to Navy SEAL or to, deep sea diver, whatever you want after like 2 years of boatswain mating. And I've seen it not happen. So yeah, the Air Force
Yeah.
and the Navy, so we're opposites. I was
Yeah.
going Air Force, and looking back, I was like, man, sometimes I wish I had gone Air Force, and it is what it is, and then Navy, like you said, Navy had it, I think, the worst during COVID because some of those ships got stuck out to sea for 13 months at a time or longer
Oh,
because COVID
that
hit them
yeah.
on the end of their deployment.
Yeah.
They were running out of food and all that stuff. So, and we've heard,
No, that's
I've
awful.
actually interviewed people. I had a gentleman I interviewed, Submariner. They're underway. They better come back to the surface. Oh, we've been extended for 2 weeks. Well, they ran out of food. And he said this is his truth that he shared on the show. They had nothing to eat but lima beans for every meal for 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
I know. I don't even know if I would eat lima beans on a regular day or in an emergency situation, let alone. But he said, don't worry. The chef kept morale up by making it look like different things. So they had lima bean steak, they had lima bean mashed potatoes, they had lima bean
Oh my God.
pancakes. All right, so
I
so
hope
talk
that
about
dude
it.
got an extra medal, man.
Right.
Yeah.
You gotta get some kind of chest candy for
Yeah.
that.
Heck
But yeah,
yeah.
so you talk about I gotta clarify. Is it Groton, Connecticut?
Yes, that so that one of my I loved the military, and I it's silly that I hadn't strongly considered it because growing up, my dad used to take me. I didn't want anything crazy, so for a birthday one year, they took me to the Coast Guard Academy, and we got to go out and see the Eagle, their flagship. We went to the submarine base. We couldn't go on. Well, it's funny. Years later, I would end up getting my wisdom teeth removed on Groton sub base, but that was just a happy
That's funny.
accident. Yeah. So, but he would take me down. We'd go to the water down by electric boat, and I would see the submarines from across the river. And so we'd go to small airports, and I would watch like airplanes take off. I was just enamored with the Navy ships and planes. So, in hindsight, like all I wanted to do, I hope I didn't. I probably portrayed myself as kind of an underachiever who just needed a way out. I wanted to work on airplanes, and that's what it came down to. And that's why the Navy was still very much on even the Marines too. The only one I'd kind of ruled out was Army because my uncle was Army, and he honestly told me very directly, "Do not join the Army." But I wanted to work on airplanes, and the Air Force offered probably the easiest transition to that point. But like to your story, yeah, being a linguist is pretty awesome. Like that would be pretty cool. But hindsight, like who knows? Like you can't we can't go back and judge. Yeah, that would have been pretty neat. But you had the options of I would think the two academically hardest schools in the military. You Air Force is going to send you to linguist, which is difficult.
Oh
And
yeah.
then you end up going through the nuke school, which is the hardest. I think I've read that it is the hardest academically training in the military that the military offers.
It is. It has a very high suicide rate. We had about 1 to 3 attempts a month, and then we
Oof.
had, according to a nuclear operator I met at Military Creator Con, he actually dropped out of the nuclear program, but he said it was about an 86% failure rate. They describe it as drinking water from a fire hose. So if you've ever
Yeah.
done that, you know what it's like. If you haven't done it, don't do it.
Yeah.
You didn't hear that on this show. I didn't tell you to go do that, but essentially it's like 5 years of college crammed into a year and a half, maybe less, maybe more, depending on your cycle. And it's a
Yeah.
lot. And when people hear that, it's not like regular college where, I mean, some of these college kids go to class like twice a week for an hour each. It's ridiculous, honestly, for how much money they spend and how
I
much money
know.
their professors make. Meanwhile, our military instructors, the ones that I will say is the nuclear instructors aren't paid enough because they're teaching, you know, 6 to 9 hours a day, Monday through Friday, you know, constant, complicated material. It is very different from that college life. And then you've got for the students mandatory study hours for the most part, unless you're smart enough to have no study hours each day of the week, pretty much, with the exception of I think Friday and Saturday. But depending how many hours you need for the week, you're coming in on Friday and Saturday. So I mean, and everyone had to come in I believe it was at least on Saturday or Sunday. I don't remember. It's been a while, but
Yeah.
like your weekend was dedicated to studying as well. And I mean, talking about, I mean, 6 to 9 hours straight. You'd have 5 minute breaks, 10 minute breaks in between different subjects, sometimes the same subject for a long time. So it is a lot more complicated than people think. It's changed a lot too. Some of the nuclear operators before me had death by PowerPoint. I had
Oh,
interactive instructors, which were m much more efficient than just PowerPoint. At one point, it was just quite the program. And that failure rate, I mean, I don't know if 86% is an accurate number, but I'll tell you, out of all the people I started with, I was one of maybe five people who made it through the whole program. Out of,
wow.
I knew so many people who started with us, and so many people either attempted suicide, did commit
Mm,
suicide, just academically failed out and cross-rated, or most of them got separated from the military for mental health. Now, there
yeah.
is what they call sad out, which is some of them did fake or leverage mental illness effects to get out on purpose. Like I know a group, unfortunately, one of the guys was having difficulties. Shared a medical experience and got out, and then all five of his roommates did the same exact thing and got out at the same time. So six nukes all together living in a house all got out for the same quote, mental health reasons after the first one got out. So unfortunately,
Yeah.
a lot of people leveraged it. And one of the things we've talked about is it's hard to filter through truth and reality and lies and deception when it comes to mental health. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to prove it. They have a medical team set up to provide it, but at the end of the day, it's the worst case scenario is you don't believe someone and then they commit suicide. Now that's on
Yep.
you. So
Yeah.
it is a very difficult situation on that end. But the nuke school in general, difficult material. I was actually much like you, where I didn't work very hard in school. In fact, all nukes never worked hard in school prior. Most of them, maybe like 1% of them studied hard and had to work hard to get grades. The rest of us, we got a speech when we got to nuke school. All of y'all are just naturally smart. You probably skinned by and got perfect grades just hanging out in class and not really paying attention. You just knew how to do that stuff. This school is not that place.
Not that place.
And most of us didn't listen to it. We said, "Ugh, what are you talking about, Chief? You crusty old bag." Maybe for you, Chief, not for us. And that's why so many people failed because they didn't adjust. For me,
Yep.
I had to adjust. I had to spend hours making notes, color-coded notes, and studying. Like it was not you could just show up and absorb the stuff. Some people still could do that, but majority of us, like you had to study and learn.
Yeah.
And so it was not what people thought it was. And so to go back though, the reason I brought up the specificity of Groton in Connecticut is because I've never met a military member from Connecticut who wasn't from Groton. So it's just like everyone's always from Groton. We call it in the Navy Rotten Groton. And by we, I
Oh,
mean just a majority of the people I know that were stationed there. So they didn't like it because if you're trying to be a bar party kind of person, it sucks. If you're a family guy, maybe it's okay. But that was kind of the complaint was always there's
yeah.
nothing to do. And every sailor I knew who requested to be stationed there was born there. So I
Really?
just when you said Connecticut, I was like, I guarantee this guy's from Groton. And you proved me right. So I've yet to meet someone from Connecticut who's not from Groton.
Oh, okay. Listen, I hate to correct, but I'd be remiss if I actually was born in Waterbury, Connecticut, which is not a great spot. And I only say that because I I feel like the Waterbury Army would be upset if they didn't hear their name called. But Rotten Groton, I'm not going to say it doesn't deserve that.
Not my opinion, by the way. I just want
No,
full
I get
disclosure.
it. I always wondered what it would be like to be stationed in Connecticut because that like I was from there. So, yeah, it's like home. And home is different. Home is home to you. It's just the way it is. But then when
Right.
you join the military and you go to another spot, it always has that vibe no matter whether you like it or hate it. It's like, well, I'm a visitor here. And so I wondered I wonder what people think about Connecticut because well, especially too when I joined the Air Force, those casinos weren't there yet. And not
Mm.
that they are the end all be all of Connecticut entertainment, but they are pretty cool. So it like the coastline of Connecticut is like a couple beaches and fishing, you know. the rest of it was like New Haven,
And
kind of.
there's farmland. To people's shock, they don't realize that
Yeah,
there's some farmland over there. Because I knew a sailor who was born on a farm in Connecticut. I mean, I grew up in the tri-state area, but I didn't
yeah,
even know that myself. So I was like, huh.
yeah.
But I've also driven through South New Jersey and Delaware, and it's just like the country. So people don't realize it's just acres of farm, and you're like, where am I? You think you're in Virginia the whole time. You're like, I
Yeah.
didn't get to Maryland yet. It's like, nobody. You're in you're in Delaware.
My recruiter, my first base tour was to McGuire, and he said, "We're going to McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey." And I immediately pictured, you know, like Newark. And I was like, oh, God, that'd be terrible to be stationed in McGuire. And we're driving, we get off the highway. And I don't know, it was just a couple hours from Connecticut, not a very long drive. And we're going through cornfields and
Right.
cornfields and all of a sudden we pop out at the gate of McGuire. And I was like, this is New Jersey? And, my recruiter's like, yeah, New Jersey's not that bad. And I guess I just never, we didn't, when we did like short vacations and stuff, we went north to Maine and Massachusetts. We never went, like, as a truck driver, my father wanted no part of the tri state area. So we never
Right.
went south. So I never really explored New Jersey. And I just didn't know that it was green. I pictured like the Sopranos version of New Jersey
Well,
my
it
whole
is very
life.
gray in the middle. Let me clarify. So I flew out of, I was born and raised in New Jersey. So when I went to boot camp, well, actually, I flew out of New York. But when I went back on leave the first time, so I went from the South, South Carolina to New Jersey. As I flew into Newark, the sky changed to gray. Like it did
Yeah.
change colors. So there is like a gray bubble over central New Jersey.
Oh,
But
yeah.
up north where I was raised, it was 1,200-foot mountains in my backyard. It was all
Oh,
beautiful forest, and I used to hike. There was actually a castle ruins on top of a 1,200-foot mountain near my backyard that overlooked New York City. So it's beautiful up north in all
hmm.
the mountain region
Yeah.
and a lot of lakes and mountains. And then past that central part of just the gray and the buildings and the population and the crime, then it's all farmland and beaches. It's very nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, most people don't realize that. But I will say it is highly polluted, highly taxed, highly trafficked. I mean, you could go when I was in South Carolina and Georgia as well, and North Carolina. If you drive after like 9, 10 p.m., there's no one on the road. In New Jersey, for like any time of the day or night I went to go on the road, it was bumper to bumper. It was like 1
Yeah.
a.m. And I was like, who are
Yeah.
all these people on the road? It's
Yeah.
one of
Go
the
home.
smallest states, but it has one of the largest populations.
Yeah.
So it's
I'm
terrible. The
good.
snow
I'm
turns to
good.
black after like 2 or 3
Yeah.
days.
I
Oh,
hate
it's
that. That's
gross.
the word.
And you'll just
I,
have like, 4 foot tall walls of black and gray snow.
flying
It's
home
not
from
it's not
Germany.
cookies and cream snow cones, kids. Don't
No.
don't
Don't eat
yeah.
that.
Yeah, don't
No,
eat the
flying
lemon
home
ones,
from
don't eat the chocolate ones, don't eat the cookies and cream ones.
I
Don't
would
eat
come
snow in
home from
general.
Germany. That is true nowadays. But I'd
Yeah.
fly home from Germany and sometimes we came into Newark. And I'm like, you can't, not that Germany doesn't have its share of industrial cities, but you go from the beautiful countryside of Germany and then you land in Newark. And look, it's an airport. It's not, but that Newark airport is a special
I've
kind
been
where
to plenty of
you look
airports.
out the windows and you're like, this is just awful.
No. Because I've been to Atlanta Airport, I think the largest and busiest in the country, and they've got it decorated beautifully. You go to Newark, you're just like, ugh. Like I've
Yeah,
been to some nice airports. There was an airport I went to, I think it was in Ohio. It was just like so serene. I was the only person
yeah,
there for a long time. I was just relaxing. Uh, and even like the one in Norfolk, Virginia, like they've got some art statues and stuff. I've been to a lot of airports now that I travel for work, and no, Newark is one of the lowest on the list. No offense to
yeah.
them,
Sorry,
but they
Newark.
probably get more money than any other airport, and you got to do something with it. But
Probably.
yeah,
I
and in
know.
New Jersey, driving through it, all the tolls. I mean, I once
Yeah.
spent like $200 on tolls during COVID era because I didn't have the Easy Pass, and basically, if it was $1 for the Easy Pass, it was $7 cash. And it's like, why am I being punished for cash? But it's
Yeah.
just like society now. If you have modern traditional values, you get punished more. So that's what cash was.
Yep.
Shoot, I should have told them, do you take Bitcoin? They would have been like, oh, it's free for Bitcoin users.
That That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but so just speaking of location and station, where did you first head out to in the first segment of your journey? Because obviously 21 years of service, you've moved around.
So my first assignment, you fill out your dream sheet and you don't understand how the system works yet. Well, I had a conversation. My friend in the Navy who joined the Navy, he introduced me to another gentleman who taught me all about how the Air Force works. And he said, "Well, this is what I do. I work on F-15s and I'm stationed in North Carolina. And I love North Carolina. I'd gone down there with a friend of mine on a college tour to Wake Forest University, which is like
Hmm.
honestly one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. So I said, okay. On my dream sheet, I put North Carolina and I put a bunch of aircraft stuff for my job. And sure enough, my first assignment was to North Carolina. However, one of my classmates, he had a fiance, and he said, "My fiance, I'm supposed to go to Japan, but my fiance doesn't want to go.
Hmm.
Can I swap with you to North Carolina?" And I was like, "Well, I kind of want to go to North Carolina." So I called my sister, who was a travel agent and very worldly experienced, especially compared to 18-year-old me. And I said, "Hey, my classmate wants to swap. I have North Carolina, he has Japan." And I remember like she wouldn't even let me finish a sentence. She was like, "Go to Japan." Like,
Right, right.
why on earth would you go to North Carolina if you can go to Japan? And I like, I don't know. It's so far away. Oh, thank God I listened to my sister. So that's my plug for listen to your older sister. I ended up in Okinawa, Japan, Kadena Air Base. I got there April 28th. Graduated tech school April 28th, 1995. Arrived in Kadena May 22nd, 1995. I don't know why I remember those dates, but I just do. So May 22nd, 1995, I was assigned into the 44th Fighter Squadron at Okinawa, Japan to work F-15 C&D models. And it was, man, it was one of the coolest 3 year runs of my life. I thought it was brilliant.
For sure. Yeah, North Carolina is definitely nice, but no, I was in the same mindset. I want to stay coastal side, and then I ended up, I mean, this is a funny story. I don't tell too many people, but the reason I picked that, see, I got stuck on the worst aircraft carrier in history that went through the longest refuel and overhaul in history, an extra 2 years almost, mass suicide epidemic, a murder. I mean, it was just like a
Oh
nightmare
my
ship.
God.
Right. We had three suicides in a single week. We had about 13, 15 deaths in a year and a half. One of them was a murder. And so there was just a lot going on, continually replacing leadership with just people who were supposed to make things better. But when you replace leadership with similar leadership, it doesn't really change anything. Plus, leadership is only one part of command climate. I mean, that's a conversation on its own. But
Yeah.
I only got on that ship because it was supposed to be in Japan. Now, I didn't want to go to Japan. I had no interest. Growing up, I thought New Jersey was all America. I was raised in a controlling and abusive household, and
Mm.
and that was xenophobia and racism. And I basically my mental image at that time was every other nation was just like a warring dirt pile that hated Americans. And so obviously once I went into the military, I went to South Carolina, I went to Virginia, I traveled to different states, I met people from other countries, and then I even traveled to other countries post-military. And I was like, oh wow, everything I heard was not true. I mean, there are places like that, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it's not every country that's not America. Like
Right.
there is a for lack of better words, a tier system of countries in, when it comes to that kind of stuff. And
For
so
sure.
I I had picked Japan though because my father always put on my life like, son, you want to go to Japan and get a small, beautiful, traditional Asian wife. That's what you need to do in life. That's like the one thing as a man that would make me proud of you. That's the only thing you can do that would make me proud of you. So I was like, all
Okay.
right, I put this ship to go to
Yeah.
Japan to get my Japanese wife, really for my dad. Not
There's
that I
a
would complain if I had one,
yeah.
trust me, but
Yeah.
that was why I had picked that. And then it ended up my ship didn't even make it to Japan. So I got stuck in Newport News, Virginia, trying to
Oh
live my
no.
father's dream. It's
Oh
like,
my
shoot,
God.
I would have rather just gone to well, I guess I couldn't go to Hawaii unless I went submarine, but I would have
Yeah.
gone anywhere else on an aircraft carrier and found whatever wife was there. I would have gone
Oh my
to
God.
Oregon or Washington for all I
Yeah.
care. Find a a quiet white girl. I don't know. I just anything other than what I went through to still get no Japanese wife.
Yeah,
It's
well, look, there's a
unfortunate.
couple life lessons in there. Like one, I guess you got to follow your own path, and two, yeah, be prepared to pivot because Newport News and Japan, wildly different experiences.
Yes, in fact, they couldn't be more different. The thing
Yeah,
is, it was a hard bargain anyway because it goes, you can go to this aircraft carrier in Japan, or you can go to Washington State. And I was like, I don't know. I've never been to Washington, and my sister went and said it was absolutely gorgeous. But all at that time, all I had in my head was like it's really rainy and like they don't really like people, you know. So that was still before I had traveled. Now that I've traveled, I'm like, shoot, I should have just gone and hung out in Washington. And I
yeah,
just was raised so anti-West Coast because I'm an East Coaster. Like
I
it's
know,
just the little rivalry we have, and so I
I know,
regretted that.
yeah,
I should have just gone submarine and gone to Hawaii or something. But you know, at the time, that's what happened. And unfortunately, I didn't get to travel much. I didn't stay in long enough to travel. But that's a story on its own. So you went to, you mentioned Japan. Just real
yep.
quick, because I have been there myself as well. Post service, or what did you think about it? What did you kind of like about it? Obviously, it's a little different, 1995 compared to I went there like 3 weeks ago. So obviously,
Oh
it's a
yeah.
little bit different. But what did you enjoy about it, or not enjoy
So
about it?
Okinawa is like the Hawaii of the United States. You know, Okinawans prefer to be called Okinawans as opposed to Japanese, although technically, they are a part of the nation of Japan. And so I say that because it's island life. It wasn't like all the stuff you see on TV about Japan was typically like Tokyo, and you see Mount Fuji and
Right.
the nature up there, or the city life of Tokyo. And then I go to Okinawa, which was a very small, very quiet, peaceful place, except for the U.S. military that was stationed there. But
Mm.
that's a different story. It's a whole
That's
nother
exactly how
podcast.
I felt where I was. It was like it was so peaceful and quiet, and then there'd be some rowdy American with tattooed sleeves and drinking
Yep.
loud. Like if I was on the train, I could tell you who was American, even if
Oh,
they looked
yeah.
Japanese, because they were so loud, and I just didn't
Yeah.
get it. It was like boot camp. The reason my division got beat all the time, people just wouldn't stop talking or stop
Yeah.
talking loud, and I've
Yeah.
never understood it. I talk a lot, but like if I'm in a situation where like, hey. You can't talk like when I'm on the trains in Japan, you don't hear a peep from me. And there
Yep.
would be people and like my fiance was giving me a hard time. She's like, "You're the most anti-white guy I know." When we were in Japan. When I'm in America, I'm like, "Woo, white people." But when I was in Japan, I was just like so anti-American.
No,
She
I
was like,
like they're my least favorite tourists are
"Right.
Americans. And listen, and there were different nationalities in Germany that caused trouble, but by and large, if there was a fight or an issue, it was Americans. It's like it's
Yeah.
just the way it is. And Okinawa, I can't even say I was there during a tough stretch because they had a lot of violence and unfortunately a lot of sexual assault. And you got too many. The demographic is terrible because even on the Air Force Base, your biggest demographic is going to be 18 to 25. They're in the dorms. The ratio of guys to girls, and these are not justifications for anything. I'm just presenting the stats. It's a high percentage of guys to girls. You got Marines there. You have sailors there. There's no army that I could think of. There's a couple army stations, so there are army there, but it's just a recipe for disaster. Luckily, it's not. It's a little bit bigger. There are things to do to keep people occupied, but we had a lot of violence and people out. Gate 2 Street was the big party street. And as far as my experience, I am a little. I don't want to say I'm ashamed because at 18, this is kind of the natural way of doing things. But I was not ready to experience a different culture. I was happy that when I got to Okinawa, 18, you could legally drink. I lived in a dorms. I worked with all my best friends. We worked together. We lived together. It was my first time really experiencing freedom. I was the youngest of seven, Italian. I'm the only boy, so my mother kept me under her thumb. And so here I was enjoying freedom. I was on the island. There was always warm out. We had just the coolest job in the world. Working on the flight line was just so much fun. and I like to drink and party. And I was one of the loud Americans. I dated a Japanese girl for a while, and she at least was able to introduce me to a little bit of the culture, for which I was very thankful.
My dad would be proud of you. You've done
But
more than I
it
have.
was spent 3 years in Okinawa, and I didn't do anything of cultural significance or very little. I wasted my time in the bars and, too much of it hungover. And again, no regrets. You're 18, and I had a great time. I'm still good friends with some of the airmen I was stationed with. I loved it, but I did not appreciate Japan for what it was.
Well, this is a conversation I just had the other day, actually, with anywhere in the military. People are so focused on the drinking scene, especially in the Navy, but I think in any branch,
Oh
because I've
yeah.
heard Army stories, Marine stories. People like miss out on so much culture and experience wherever they are. I know I was stationed in near Charleston, South Carolina. I was in Goose Creek, and it's Goose Creek. We call it Goose Creek because all sewer plants and paper mills.
Oh,
Plus, we
oh,
just
the
don't
paper mills.
we just don't like it there in general. But it was a beautiful place. And I know so many sailors who never went to Charleston once. And it's like Charleston's not the greatest place in the world, but the fact that like so many people don't take advantage of the opportunities they have. Like so many, I don't know if you've ever experienced, are you familiar with the MWR?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so for those listening, if you don't know what that is, basically, it's basically this group on the command that puts together little activities and trips to explore the culture and area. It might be kayaking, it might be electric bike tours, whatever it is. And it's a great way for sailors to safely participate in those kinds of events and to do so with a group of whoever is leading it and whoever joins. So, a lot of people make fun of it, but really, I mean, the sailors that I knew that actually did it loved it. I mean, they got to do some great events for relatively good prices in a safe way and it allowed them to meet some people outside of their rate that is, or outside of their MOS or job, right? It
Yep.
allowed you to meet other people that were stationed there. So, I think it's such a shame that people are always, because anytime I ask someone, like I ask a higher ranking petty officer or chief, is so and so a good place for a port call? Is so and so a good place to be stationed? It was always, well, there's nothing there that if you want to do drinking or clubbing. If you want to have a family there, it's a good place. But if you want to go drinking, clubbing, no. And it was
Yeah.
always drinking, clubbing. I said, okay, what about like anything else than drinking? What about like historical stuff, cultural stuff, the dining scene, the shopping scene? But people were like, that's I mean, what you hear from most 18-year-old and 25-year-old young guys, that's gay. Why would I think about
Yeah.
that?
Who
That's kind of their
cares?
response. Who cares?
Yeah.
And so it's a shame. I guess I'm grateful I did go off base. I had some friends who would insist we go off base and check stuff out. So I am grateful for that. But definitely, I think so many people join the military, and when you're like talking to the recruiter, that's what you're asking about, the port calls and the stations, and then you get there
Yeah.
and you're like, I'm just gonna either vegetate and rot at home, or just go out to the bars and get blackout drunk or get in trouble. So it's a
Yep.
real shame. And then
No, it is. Yeah.
you talked about Japan. From there, where does your journey continue?
So there I went to talk about flipping the script. I went from F-15 fighters to the B-2 bomber out in Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri. And I remember when I got that assignment, I was like, "Oh, this is gonna suck, Missouri. Like it sucks. I'm
Miserable
gonna hate it.
Missouri. Yeah.
Miserable. It's misery. Ha ha ha. It's gonna be terrible." And this dude, and it's funny, and I don't even. It was important to me at the time, but there was a senior airman. I was an A1C, so the senior airman, so he's very wise and experienced, like an E4, right? But when you're an E3, that is wise and experienced. He was like, "Hey, you're going to Whiteman?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're gonna love it." And he was black, and I was like, "Honestly, dude, I thought you of all people would hate it there. I figured it's like country and like backwards." Again, I grew up in Connecticut. I'm not justifying my small narrow mindedness. He was like, "Oh no, Kansas City is awesome." He said it's such a cool place. Well, he went on to explain that there was a college 10 miles away. So you're drinking and you're partying. There's plenty to be had. He said, but the people in Missouri are actually really nice. Like cowboys are pretty cool people. You're going to see a lot of beautiful scenery, right? And then Kansas City is just a criminally underrated city as far as having a lot to do, a
I mean,
very,
it's
very
huge.
cool vibe. It's
Spans
huge.
two states.
It's huge. It's geographically, it's enormous. But there's so much to do. And that's why one of the reasons my podcast, our first filming line is in Kansas City. Because that's where I met my one of my best friends in the world, is more akin to a brother than a friend. I met Andy Choka. I got there the day before he did, and he had a car and I didn't. So we both lived in the dorms, and we got to Missouri and like, well, what do we do? And I started to understand the error of my ways where when you leave Japan and like, I don't know shit about Japan. Like, I know what the Airman's Club looks like, and that's probably it. It's like, okay, so I'm going to do Missouri a little different. And I met Andy. He had a car. He was a cyclist, so he used to like to get on his bike and go explore. Now I wouldn't follow him on a bike, but he was like, "Hey, I've been to this cool town. Let's go." Okay, we'd go check it out. And to your point, like maybe we just went to a small town and got lunch or breakfast. We didn't have to go and, interrogate the whole town, but it was better to see something during the day and remember it than only going to a bar at night. That
Right.
being said, we did party a lot. We had so much fun. We started to meet locals, like I a bunch of friends that were from Missouri, and it was just a really cool experience. Night and day different from Japan, meeting cowboys, like actual ranchers, going to a pasture party, which is like, a party out in a field where there is no light pollution. Your cell phone doesn't get signal, and it's just you and a bonfire out in the middle of a pasture. It was so much
That's
fun.
nice.
It was fun. Like a city kid from Connecticut, that was my first experience. Like, oh, this is kind of cool. I like this. And then Kansas City, again, criminally underrated as far as the vibe. It's such a cool place. It was cool in 1998 when I went, and it's still cool now.
Yeah, and I got into an argument with a shipmate over the location of Kansas City because for those of y'all who are Godzilla fans, I'm a huge, huge Godzilla fan, and they dropped the Godzilla versus America series, including Godzilla versus Kansas City. And
Oh,
my shipmate and I got into an argument about, Missouri versus Kansas, and we got into a whole thing about how he didn't understand that it was across state line technically because
yeah,
where it lies, and so
yeah.
we
They,
had a
they
huge blowout over that because one of us, which was me, was researched on the matter, and the other was just
yep,
making up whatever he was making up, and he wanted to argue
yeah,
with me. I'm like, look it up, and he's like, well, this AI overview said this. I said, just look on the first page of Google. It's look at
yeah.
a map. Just look at a physical map. It's over
That's
the state line. He's like, well, this AI says it's in Missouri. I was like, look at the map. Just look at a map. Don't you don't
when
need to
you're
ask AI about it.
when you're from there, when you live there, people will specify. I think always lived on the Missouri side. Maybe it is different in the Kansas side, but the default assumption is Kansas City, Missouri. So when it's Kansas City, Kansas, people will say KCK
Mm,
to let you know that, oh, it's KCK. It's on the Kansas side. Like that's a real thing there. Like that people have to deal with all the time.
yeah, it's interesting.
KCK.
It's
Yeah.
interesting how they designed it that way. You think they would have just been like, all right, there's a state line here. We should probably just, split it up. Because now what? The city has two double state or it just sounds like a nightmare to be honest, like to figure that out,
Yeah.
government and state government wise and stuff. And then you get into a feud if you're in charge of one state and the person's in charge of the other state and you two have to share a city. I mean, that just sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah. I'm
I
not
wouldn't
sure
want to live
all
there.
the logistics of it. I just know that like right now, I think if I heard correctly, they're talking about moving the Kansas City Chiefs into the Kansas City, Kansas side, for
Mm,
like tax purposes, and people are up in arms about it. They're like, but it's Missouri, and like, well, technically, it's still Kansas City, but that's a personal issue to them, so I'm not going to poke my nose in it because I don't want to get thumped. But yeah,
right.
it was, but it was. I remember just like one quick story about going partying. We went up to Kansas City. It's not a cool. I don't want to say it's not cool. It's not the same as it was in 1998, but there was a area called Westport, which was like bars and restaurants and just a cool place. If you want to go meet girls, you want to go have a few drinks. And so Andy and I went up there. We there was a bar called Blaney's, and they had a Blaney's basement, and it was like either free or $5 to get in. And so we went in this basement, and there was two bands playing. One of them was like literally in a basement, and then the next was playing outside. You go walk all the way through the basement, go out to the patio out back. And at the time, I was like playing guitar. I was trying to play guitar, and I was doing sound for a band like terribly. I was bad at it, but we all were, so it didn't matter. But I'm watching this band play, and I'm like, they're actually pretty good. And then after a few minutes, I'm like, actually, they're really good. And then like their fourth or fifth song, I'm like, these guys are fantastic. And we saw them for like a $5 cover charge. They're one of probably 20 bands playing in a 1 mile radius in this neighborhood of Kansas City. So I wrote their name down because at the time I think I had a Motorola flip phone, so it's not like I was Googling them. I went back and looked them up, and they had been on the Grand Ole Opry stage before, and they'd been on tour with Jimmy Buffett. And we saw them for a $5 cover charge in a
Wow.
random basement. And I like that's the type of stuff that happened in Kansas City. Like this dude was, or I say this dude, the lead singer was fantastic, but this band was insane. And we saw him for $5 on a random Saturday or Friday or Saturday night in Kansas City. And that type of stuff happened in KC all the time. Then you had the football, and I saw my first Steelers game there. I saw a ton of baseball games. It was
And
just
you're
like,
still a
yeah.
Steelers fan to this day, you mentioned, correct?
I'm as you can see from my background, I have a problem. Yeah. From
So
since I
that's
was a
where it
kid. Yeah.
started.
No, from when I was a kid,
Oh,
my
really?
childhood. Yeah. Yeah. I was born with this affliction, I think.
Oh, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
that's the way to word it. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
curious. I didn't know what team Connecticutians would vote for, to be honest, because like I guess you got the Jets and Giants are close
Yep.
by, but I don't know if Connecticut has its own.
No. So growing up as a kid, my mom would take me to like J.C. Penney's to go back to school shopping. And there were like three clothes racks. There would be the Jets for football, right? The Jets, the Giants, and the Patriots. And the same for baseball. It'd be the Mets, the Yankees, and the Red
Right.
Sox. And for all the sports, it was like that. And so it was like my sister was a Red Sox fan. I was a Yankee fan. I rooted for the Giants growing up because I could watch them on Sunday. I never, it was hard for me to see a Steelers game with the way the rules were. The only games you could watch in Connecticut were probably for the same for you, pretty much was the Jets, Giants, and Patriots. And then Monday Night Football, which I couldn't stay up that late. I wasn't allowed to stay up to watch Monday Night Football. So but as the youngest of seven, I got a hand me down. I had a lot of hand me down clothes, and I got a jersey. It was used, but it was a Steelers jersey. And what I loved about it was when I went to school, I was the only one wearing a Steelers jersey. There'd be people, nobody really wore Patriot stuff back in that time. They
Mm.
they were not a thing yet. But I mean they were, but nobody cared. It was Giants and Jets. But then there's one kid wearing a Steelers jersey. So I just thought I was the coolest thing ever. And that was like literally grade school, elementary school, uh, third, fourth, second grade. I remember wearing that shirt, and that was it. I was hooked.
So I know it's a side question, but I'm so curious. So you had a Japanese girlfriend, and you and I
Hmm.
could talk off mic about some questions I have. But going to Missouri, then talking about the college scene, did you get yourself a Kansas City girl?
Well, so my personal life in Kansas City, this is where I faced my first real life obstacle, where life stopped to be fun. I had met a girl on a software platform called ICQ. It was like the first age of internet dating.
Okay.
And I was never good at like going out to a bar and getting a girl.
The cold
It's
call.
just, yeah, it was not my thing. And so I met this girl online, and like, man, when she flew down to Kansas City, all my friends were like, oh my God, she's gonna look like a giant hose beast, and she's probably a dude, or she's 80 years old. Like, there's no chance that she's the girl that sent you pictures of her. And lo and behold, she was. And we had a lot of fun. She was awesome. Like, unfortunately, we were not responsible,
Mm,
and she ended up getting pregnant. And so I was 21 years old. She was 19. And luckily, I had a job, right? I was still a senior airman in the Air Force. I got my girlfriend pregnant. I had an amazing daughter who's 26 years old now, and I love her and I'm very proud of her. But we did not work out. Like, it was too much stress. We did not really, we didn't have a real relationship. We used to like to have fun and party and go to concerts. And being two responsible parents at 21 and 19, we were not capable of it. So we had gotten married because I thought that was the right thing to do. And I didn't realize at the time that the military would have taken care of her pregnancy anyway because it was my dependent, but that's neither here nor there. I thought I was doing the responsible thing.
right.
Then shortly thereafter, I started to hit my first trouble. I didn't know how to, this is my very first failure, like true fail. I viewed my divorce as a failure. And it was the first real life hiccup I had, and I did not handle it well. I ended up in anger management because I was drinking too much. I ended up in anger management because I had a little incident. The anger management therapist, or lack of a better term, was like, "Hey, on your questionnaire, I'm an honest person, so I filled out my questionnaire honestly." And they're like, "You might have like some alcohol stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, probably. That's my coping mechanism right now." And that dude kind of changed my life because I had this perception of what therapy was, and this was just we were just talking and sitting there chatting, and it started to realize like my father had gotten diagnosed with cancer. And then I get married to this girl, and now I'm having a baby, and we got divorced, and now I'm starting to get financial troubles. And it was like, dang, man. He's like, these things independently are challenging for a 21-year-old or 22 maybe at the time now. He said, but you're trying to face them together, and of course, then adding stress at work. So that was like the first time I realized like life isn't really a game. It's not just drinking and partying, and there are consequences, and I'm staring at like a little 10-pound crying consequence. And then I met another girl, and I can't bash that relationship. It did not work out. We ended up getting married again. I was dead set and I wanted to be married apparently. But I'm very thankful because one, like, we can remain friends now over the years. We subsequently got divorced, but it was by marrying her, I was able to kind of get out of Missouri and get to Germany because she had an assignment to Germany at a base that I never would have been able to get to. So I got an assignment command sponsored. They sent me over there, or a joint, whatever they used to call it, joint spouse. And I got an assignment to Germany. We did not last very long. It was kind of, it just was. But we didn't have any children, and we were both able to like amicably split. Financially speaking, we didn't have to worry about it because she was in the military, I was in the military. So it's kind of like, hey, this didn't work, but you're in Germany, I'm in Germany. Let's enjoy the best out of it, make the most out of it. So at that point, I'd escaped Missouri. It was an awesome assignment. I did love it. I met lifelong friends there. I had a great time. I had a daughter who's amazing. And now here I am in Germany, again, single. But I started to realize like I'm not good at doing my career and a relationship. I don't know, something about me. I can be good in the military. I can be good in a relationship. Somehow I struggle with doing both at the same time.
Mm,
So the first time I got divorced, I decided to drink and party, and that was going to be my coping mechanism. The second time I got divorced, I decided the first way did not work. So a friend of mine was like, "Hey, I'm taking a college course. on Ramstein. You should come with me. It'll be fun. We'll do it together." And I said, "Yeah, that's probably a healthier way of dealing with my stress by going to school, adding more stress." But
Right.
and it was the best. Like I thank Wayne all the time because I ended up graduating before I left Germany. I graduated my bachelor's degree, and that kind of helped me. One, it kept me out of the bars, and it pointed me on the path that I wanted to go. So yeah, then I was in Germany living the dream.
For sake of tracking the timeline, between your first divorce and then finding your second wife, what was that timeline?
Oh yeah, not
Like, was
long.
that a few days, a few weeks, or was this years? Like,
It
was she
was
helping
like
raise your daughter?
no, no. So I got divorced. Let's see, probably 99, and then I would have met Lori probably the end of 99, 2000, and we got married like 2002. So we dated for like a year. I met her like shortly after, but I think she only met my daughter a couple times because I didn't have custody. So
Oh, okay.
my first wife went back to, she was from Toronto. Her family was from Toronto. So she went back to Toronto and moved in with her parents. And luckily, like we had that option. You know, my ex-in-laws took wonderful care and, welcomed her back with open arms and took great care of my daughter. So my daughter Alexis was able to enjoy a relationship with her grandparents and grow up and a stable, if not if divided, which is not ideal, but at least she was taken care of. So we were very lucky in that regard.
Okay, so you didn't bring her to Germany with you then.
No, I did not. No, she
Oh,
stayed in
okay.
Canada, and in fact, I did bring her to Germany once on vacation. She came over with my mom and my sister. So I did get to see her in Germany. She was little, but I wanted her to at least experience it. So we kind of waited as long as we could, so she'd be as old as she could be to
Right.
hopefully remember some of it. And we brought her over on a little trip, but she did not live with me. No, and that's the unfortunate part. And this was the sacrifice that we made, is until she was 18, my daughter didn't live with me at all. I was just a long distance father who didn't write enough letters, didn't make enough phone calls. We enjoyed our time together, but it was probably my sister Roseanne that took most care of my daughter. She would always invite like Alexis down to Connecticut to stay with her, and she was great. Like my family was real great, and Nancy, my ex, was very good about letting Alexis go and live with my family and experience my family. So we got really lucky. Like we made the best out of it. But no, Alexis did not actually live with me until she was 18.
So from that point onward, did you have to put in a lot of extra work to build that relationship, or was it not until you got out of the military that you were able to really focus on that?
Yeah, I didn't, my daughter and I have a good relationship. I probably, yeah, I she deserved more of me than I gave her. Again, I was focused on my career and I thought I was doing the right thing, and my child support were never late, and I said if money was needed, I sent money, and if some discipline was needed, I would try and make a phone call for as much as that works. But
Right.
as far as cultivating a real relationship with my daughter, I was not the best. And then so we had the opportunity to move in together when she was 18. Her and her mom got in a fight, like standard girl stuff. You know, she was old enough, she got in a fight with her mom. Was like, "I'm going to move in with dad." So we did. And then we started. It's funny because we're kind of similar. Like neither one of us is. We're both a little bit emotionally distant, so it's kind of like we have a funny relationship. I mean, I think we have a good relationship, but
Okay.
it's
And did you ever get
maybe.
married again and have more kids, or what's the journey like that? I mean, 'cause so you talked about Germany for a while, which is pretty interesting. And actually, I was curious how you met that wife who got you to Germany, because it sounds like was she at the same base as you initially?
Yeah, she was a civilian who worked at the Airmen's Club. We used to go to the Airmen's Club and drink all the time. They had like 10-cent wings and dollar for 20-ounce Bud Light drafts. And
Oh
at the
wow.
time, that's
Okay.
all I could afford. Yeah.
Is this
So we would,
this is a bar on base called the
yeah,
Airmen's
yeah.
Club? Like, is that at every Air Force base or?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like the Airmen's and NCO Club
Hmm.
or the Enlisted Club.
Yeah, I don't think there's like a, well, I never experienced a Navy equivalent. There used to be a bar on base at Nuke School, but it was shut down, I guess, for COVID or whatever, and it didn't really
Oh,
open
man.
up until by the time I was leaving there. So, I mean, there's different, I know like in Yokosuka, Japan, my buddies mentioned there's a nuke bar just for the nuclear operators. So that's pretty cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've never been to any like military exclusive, for lack of better words, or military themed bars, especially on base. So that sounds cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
There's every base I've been to had an Airmen's Club or an enlisted club and an NCO club and then the officers club. They all had at least, those.
okay. And so you met her there as a civilian working on base.
Yeah. And then she had decided that she wanted to join the military. And so she did and went to tech school. I went down to Biloxi, Mississippi, where she was in tech school and visited. And then she got her first assignment to Germany. And we decided, like, yeah, let's get married. And so that brought me to Germany. So I was pretty stoked about that.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually was just in Biloxi on my way home from Military Creator Con, so
Oh,
that's
nice.
pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
it's
Yeah.
I want to go back. I liked it there.
Is it right next to Ocean Springs?
That I don't know where
I
Ocean
think
Springs
so.
are.
Hold
It
on, let
makes
me.
sense because it's right on the
Mhm.
ocean. So if Ocean Springs, like, I
I
didn't
say
I didn't
that
realize. Yeah, yeah.
Ocean Springs was absolutely gorgeous. It was one of the nicest beaches I've been to. It was some of the friendliest people I've ever met in my life. And I'm
Really?
pretty sure it's like right next to Biloxi. Yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah. They're right next to each other. So Biloxi and then you go Ocean Springs. So it's even the same coastline right there. So yeah,
Oh,
Biloxi
yeah.
and Ocean Springs, one of the most. Honestly, out of all the places that my fiance and I stopped on the way back from Military Creator Con, that area of Biloxi and Ocean Springs was the most beautiful. Granted, we went to a lot of different places, both inland and coastal side, and we didn't get to spend too much time at each place, but Ocean Springs had a beautiful little historic shopping center where, all the streets had these historic buildings and they were all great restaurants, amazing food and
Oh,
stores,
yeah.
and then the beach was just gorgeous. In fact, I posted a social media reel about the beach we went to had a wooden sculpture. So someone had carved a tree where it turned into all different animals, and it was just absolutely
Whoa.
amazing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, shout out to Biloxi, Mississippi, or as they say when I was in Mississippi, they said we call it Mississippi. We don't say the second set of letters. At
Oh,
least the
okay.
part when I was on leave with a shipmate outside of Meridian, they call it Mississippi. At least that's what
Mississippi.
his family called it,
Yeah.
Mississippi. So I always say that, and I was like, it's easier to say. So
Yeah. That's true. I like
yeah.
that. Yeah, I liked it down there. It was cool. There was a funny story. One of the things people remembered back again, this would have been like 2000. There was a shark. I don't know what it was made out of, plaster or maybe wood. I don't know. It was a
Hmm.
giant shark, and it was like off the left of that main road that runs along the water. And it's kind of everybody knew that, hey, there's a big giant shark. I don't know what it was for, if it was a restaurant or a park, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a giant shark. Years later, after Hurricane Katrina, I met a girl on base in Ramstein in Germany, and she was from Biloxi, or she had worked in Biloxi.
Mm.
And so I think she used to work at the school on base. So I was enrolling in classes. And I was like, oh, yeah, I was in Biloxi. I remember the shark. And she was like, oh, the shark is gone. I said, what do you mean? Like Hurricane Katrina came and took it out. Well, like that wasn't the worst of it. That Katrina devastated Biloxi. So I don't mean to make light of it, but that shark was just gone. And I was like, dang, man, I remember that shark. It's like, yeah, well, it's out to sea now. I was like, well,
Real
so
life
I'm glad to
Sharknado
see.
picked it
Yeah,
up
like
and
it. Yeah, like
yeah.
maybe that was yeah. So, but Biloxi was a cool. It was cool.
Yeah, but definitely different than Germany. You mentioned being over there for a
Oh yeah.
while, and then from there, where does your journey continue on to? At this point, how long have you been in the service?
So I hit 30 years old in Germany, And so that was 12 years. And then I left '08, '02 to '08. So I left at my 14-year mark. I made tech sergeant, which is E6. And I'd gotten my college degree. I was pretty stoked. I graduated with a bachelor's degree. I had made tech sergeant. I had lined myself up, but I knew I before I could retire, I had 6 years left, and I had to go to Korea because we have to do a short tour in the military, in the Air Force, or else, like, you're going to do a short tour. So I decided to proactively volunteer to go to Korea in order that way on my way home, I might be able to get a cool follow on assignment. I'd been overseas now for 6 years. That would have been my seventh year. So I decided to go back to the States. So I went to Osan Air Base, Korea for a year, and it was by far the hardest year of my life work wise. That
Hmm.
base is absolute brutality. It was like a meat grinder. I probably worked 3/4 of the Sundays that I was there and 2/3 of the Saturdays I was there. We would go weeks and months without a true day off, even if you're just going in for a couple hours. It was hard. That was like 14-hour shifts. That was a
Mm.
long year. Now but you're remote. You don't bring your family with you. So I think that's why your management or your command and your leadership is like, oh, they don't care if they're at work for 14 hours a day because you don't have a family to go to. But that was a tough year.
Right, but I have me and I need to go
Yeah,
home.
yeah.
Right. It
Osan. Oy, I do not recommend it.
Note taken. Now, why were you still in? I mean, you talk about you've been in for a couple of years at this point. Why did you keep staying in? Because it was all you knew? You felt some kind of stability? Were you
I
scared of the civilian world?
no, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, I knew from day one, I'm a positive person. And if you only look at the negatives of anything, you will hate everything. Like, you will hate everything. There is nothing out there, no matter how good it is, it doesn't have serious negative. And the Air Force had tons of stupid shit. Tons of it. You know, I mean, Osan, they almost killed me physically. Like, I'm shocked I did not have a cardiac issue, but it was still like there was some ridiculous moments that were so much fun. There was moments that were they felt so good. I loved being in the Air Force. I did. I loved it. I did not want any other life for myself.
I think
That
what happened
yeah.
is they saw your track record with relationships and they're like, the last thing he needs is a Korean woman. You got to keep him on base, 14-hour shifts.
Exactly. Yeah, like we know this guy's MO. We used to have a joke. I'm sure they have the same form of a joke. It was like the Air Force always they want you to have a kid in your first enlistment. That way they guarantee a second enlistment. Because the first enlistment, I pondered getting out after the first enlistment. That was in Missouri. Again, I'd struggled a little bit. I'd had my first real taste of life failure, and I met a bunch of cool people in Missouri. I thought about going in the guard, and I
Mm,
thought, well, maybe this would, but cooler heads prevailed, and I said, no, I actually really like what I'm doing. And once, if I can get out of trouble, I'd got myself in some hot water. The military, sometimes it's hard because once you start drowning, and I know that you understand this, they don't, it's not the easiest environment to get yourself upright again. It
for
has a
sure.
tendency to just keep pounding. And I was proud of myself. With the help of great people around me, but I was able to get off the mat and, like, okay, we figured everything out. I can't change the lumps I've taken, but I can press forward. And I did. And I genuinely loved being in the Air Force. I loved the military. I love supporting the efforts, and I loved it. That's really what it came down to.
And you've kind of hinted at it a little bit, but can you tell us just a little more, whatever you can share with us, a little more of a breakdown of your job details. So you were just like an aircraft mechanic working on the planes, or what exactly was your day-to-day life? Obviously, each station was a little different, but it sounds like
Yeah.
you were kind of just hands-on physical labor each and every day.
Yeah, so up until I made tech sergeant, and even then, I worked on the flight line, and I was aircraft weapon systems. So I know Navy does it a little different, but you're a specialty. So in a an aircraft maintenance unit, you got crew chiefs, and they kind of do the whole airplane. Then you have avionics specialists, you have engine specialists, and then of those specialists, there's some that do like E&E, electro environmental, some do specific, very specific systems,
Right.
and then we have weapons troops. And so my job was maintaining the armament system of the aircraft physically and electronically. So the mechanical aspect of it, the electrical aspect of it, and then loading the bombs and missiles and ammunition on the aircraft itself. So we would load the guns. The F-15 had a 20 millimeter cannon. We would load that. We would put on F-15Cs. We didn't load bombs. They didn't carry bombs, but it was an air-to-air aircraft. So we loaded AIM-120, AIM-7, AIM-9 missiles, and then we again maintained the systems, did all the scheduled maintenance. And then in Whiteman, I was off equipment. So that means I was in a back shop. So they would take all the equipment off the aircraft and bring it to our shop, and we would fix it there. So it wasn't quite as exciting, but you learned a lot more. Like you learned actually a lot better how to fix equipment. And
Right.
we would tear equipment apart and have to rebuild it. It was a nice environment, a little bit more conducive to have like a normal schedule. On the flight line, the negative to the flight line environment was you could go in at 4 o'clock in the morning on Monday, then Tuesday and Wednesday would be a 06 roll call, and then Thursday would be 04 roll call, and then Friday would be 9 a.m. roll call. And like, I would really like to be able to have a normal sleep schedule. That doesn't happen on the flight line. Also, you could go to work and work for 12 or 16 hours. The only thing that we couldn't do is we couldn't load weapons after our 12-hour mark. But that didn't mean we couldn't fix airplanes or do all sorts of dumb stuff.
Right.
So it was the flight line is a very exciting. It's rapidly changing. It was just an exciting place to be. Like one of the coolest things in the world was the morning launches when you get to work and everything is quiet and you have your roll call, you have your coffee, and then you all go out to the flight line together and you're going to get ready. And then pilots drive out and you see pilots coming out to the aircraft. And then a couple minutes later, you hear your first APU start, the auxiliary power unit, and the first engine starts. And it sounds corny, man. I understand that, but it really was like it was a happy place for me. Then the engines start going, jets would start taxiing, and that's all you would hear for the next like 4 hours because they would stagger. So you had three different
Right.
squadrons, and over the course of 4 hours, aircraft coming and going, and then maybe you'd get a little bit of lull for lunch, and then you'd be out there, doing the turning the aircraft, doing your quick inspections, maybe putting up some chaff and flare, launching them again. It was a cool environment. I liked it. Then the Germany, I was equipment maintenance as well. And then when I went to Korea, I was an expediter, which is the worst job in the
Mm.
military. It's the thankless job because now you're driving a truck. You're the one who dictates maintenance on the flight line. So you
So
gotta.
everyone hates you.
Everyone hates you because for your production superintendent is mad at you because you're not getting enough work done and you're not getting it done fast enough. Your airmen hate you because you're making them do too much work too fast. Your other expediters hate you because I think it's just a natural default setting. And it's like, I am the most hated person on this base. It's like the expediter. There's no love for the expediter. You can never get enough work done to keep supervision happy. You can never have an easy enough day to keep your airmen happy. And you're just stuck in the middle. And you're driving, you're not even like, you're driving around a bread van up and down the flight line, barking orders at people. So it's terribly unhealthy. I was drinking probably 60 ounces. Actually, I'd switched over to Monster energy drink. I'd start my day with like a
Oh
20-ounce
no.
coffee and then pour that chemical crap for the rest of the afternoon. It was awful. And it was high stress. I remember getting yelled at, like screamed at the top of my lungs. And I'm a 30-year-old, I'm a grown ass man. And I'm getting yelled at like almost on a weekly basis, daily basis. Like, yeah, okay, man, whatever.
One of the interesting parts of the military for sure. And even like it's interesting because you have some commands where there's someone like half your age screaming at you because they have more job experience, and it's some weird situations sometimes. And it was always weird to me being in boot camp. Like, yeah, for all the 18 and 19-year-olds, we were still just basically high schoolers, but there were some grown men in boot camp who
Yeah.
were just acting like they were still in high school and getting yelled at, and it was just so strange to see that. But for sure, and so Korea was kind of like your, your worst moment, but
Yeah.
that's getting closer towards the end of your service now. So where did you go after Korea?
So then I went to a little base that hardly anyone even knows about, Creech Air Force Base. It's about 40 miles northwest of Las Vegas.
Hmm.
It's well known now. It's the home of the RPA, the MQ-1 Predator and the MQ-9 Reaper. I'm not going to say the D word, drone, because they're not drones. They're remotely piloted aircraft. The reason I say is not well known. It used to be called Indian Springs Airfield, and it wasn't until they put
Hmm.
the Reaper and Predator there that they renamed it Creech, and they turned it back into an active base again. Again, 40 miles northwest of Las Vegas. There's a reason they put out in the middle of the desert. That was again the remotely piloted aircraft. It was a very exciting base. If not, we weren't overly busy. We didn't have the pace that some other bases did, but it was such a unique mission. I mean, it was cutting edge technology. We supported a deployed location 365 days a year. So we always had men and women in combat zones. Our air crew that was on Creech were flying active missions. So if you're at all familiar with the RPA, you know that they have to be takeoff and landing has to be done on location. So if we have an aircraft, let's say Afghanistan, there has to be a ground control station and an air crew that could take off and land in Afghanistan with them. However, once they're airborne, they can hand off that control of that aircraft to anyone in the world. And so we
Hmm.
had air crews in Vegas who were flying combat missions in Afghanistan from Nevada. The reason that they can't take off and land is there's an 8 second delay from the satellite communications. So obviously, an 8 second delay for a combat mission or ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, that's fine. You don't want to land or take off with an 8 second delay. So you get there and you're seeing these new aircraft, like literally brand new aircraft. It's such a cool mission. You like experiencing remotely piloted aircraft for the first times ever, knowing that you're supporting a combat unit that's downrange that eventually I rotated to and got to experience that myself as well. It was, you're in a beautiful Las Vegas. I say beautiful. It's like the desert is different. And if you haven't experienced it, it's really pretty. After 4 years, it got a little old, but the first couple days or first couple years, it
Right.
was like what a cool experience. Again, we used to have roll call. We would open the giant hangar doors, right? The hangar is as big as a football field. We would open up the doors. So it was almost like you're being outside and you could look up at the mountains on a clear blue sky, and we would have our roll call overlooking mountains with the blue sky and the sun shining. And there'd be people complaining, like, look, if you're not going to work overly hard today, we're teaching you how to fix aircraft, some of the most cutting edge technology in application today. And you're starting your day off by looking at the clear blue sky on a sunny day, looking at mountains. If you're still miserable, like I can't help you.
Right.
I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
And
Now
that
with
was where I got my first taste of leadership. I made senior NCO. I made Master Sergeant E7, and where I started to get my first taste, like true taste of management and leadership.
right, and that's a whole conversation on its own because leadership in the military is very, very, there's a lot of facets to it that you don't have in the civilian world, both good and bad, a lot of situations, and we can definitely get into that conversation. I want to finish up your service journey, so we're near the end of your service here,
Yep.
if I'm tracking the timeline correctly. So was the next change of station your last one?
It was. I guess technically not, but So I had to go back. I didn't like Las Vegas. I just didn't like the vibe. It was cool. I did 4 years there. It was a great experience. I wanted to make E8, and I had a legitimate shot at making E8, but there was a couple things I had to do, and I needed to go back overseas. So I volunteered for Korea again. I learned my lesson. I'm not going to Osan. I volunteered for the other air base in
Oh,
Korea. It's
okay.
called Kunsan, and this was a more remote place, and it I got a superintendent duty title, which was amazing. That's kind of what you need to make E8. So the stars were lined up for me to get promoted. All I had to do was show up, work really hard for a year, and good things would come. And I found out again, what's the old saying? If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan.
Right.
So I got there, and one of my best friends there, an amazing human being named Eric, he was helping me out, and he had made E8. He made senior master sergeant, and he was going to mentor me to make senior master sergeant as well. We were like pals. There was a lot of hard work there. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. And a couple months into my tour, unfortunately, Eric passed away.
Mm.
And it was kind of one of those, like, we just got a call one day that we found Eric deceased in his dorm room. I said, shit. Like, I hadn't heard from him for 2 days, but that wasn't uncommon. We lived right down the hall from each other. And I had one of my troops come down with like this 1 in 5 million affliction, was in the hospital for months. I had another one of my troops get accused of assault, and he was, one of my go-to people. I ran into a chief that really just did not like me I feel on a personal level, like we just did not jive. And that was the person I directly reported to. And I said, man, this dream year is really, it's harder than I had hoped it would be. And I just kept telling myself, listen, if you want to be a good senior master sergeant, there's only one way to do it, and that's to go through the fire. Like, you got this, you can do this. Nothing here that you've experienced is better than you. We just have to work through it with a team. Nobody's acting on their own. And unfortunately, 11 months into my 12-month tour, I got diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer, stage 2B colon cancer at a Korean hospital. So I think they told me I was going to leave in November anyway. And it was like the first week of November, I had to go to a Korean hospital. I wasn't feeling well, and I got diagnosed with cancer. And I just remember thinking, like, well, that's about the right way to end this year.
Right.
That's the cherry on top of a year. And so to wrap up my career, I was single. They told me my initial diagnosis was not good. Like, it was kind of one of the old, like, you need to get your affairs in order, and you're going to need a caregiver. I said, oh, I'm single. I'm not married. I don't have a caregiver. They said, well, we're going to send you to your home of record. I didn't even know that they could do this. So they sent me back to my home of record so that my family could take care of me. I ended up being assigned to Hanscom Air Force Base in Massachusetts, and they got me a doctor at Yale, which was like a dream. They asked me, well, is there any hospital in Connecticut you would prefer to go to? I said, well, yeah, send me to Yale. They said, okay. So I was living at home. I moved in with my sister, who had an apartment with her kids. I moved in with her. I was technically assigned to Hanscom in the patient squadron, but I didn't have to report to Hanscom. And then I literally sat home on medical leave. I'd go to, I had to go to the doctor and do my chemo treatments. I had a couple surgeries, so you're recovering from those. And that was it. Like, the patient advocate would check in on me once a week, make sure everything was good. And yeah, I was just kind of sitting, but effectively my career was over. I knew that my senior master sergeant was out the window. That wasn't going to happen. I, I mean, quite honestly, the first few months I was home, I didn't know that I would live, more than a year or two. So losing senior was minimal at that point. My assignment to Germany was gone, and I actually, thanks to the doctors at Yale, they patched me up. I had 3 surgeries. I ended up with an ostomy bag for a while. Then that got removed. I was able to reverse that. The cancer was it's gone, and they returned me to active duty, which I was shocked. I thought that that'd be it, but at that point, again, I'd put on a bunch of weight. I had neuropathy in my feet. I was never probably going to pass a PT test, or at least not in 6 months. I was not going to get promoted. I wasn't going to go to a good base. And I'd started dating an amazing woman named Lindsay. And, I was enjoying being around my family again for the first time in 20 years. So I decided at that point, just let me retire and let's be done with this and let's turn the page. So I guess my last base was technically Hanscom in
Mm,
Massachusetts, although I was only there a couple weeks.
right.
And that was it, man. We had a retirement ceremony in the VFW, and that was it. Air Force career put a pin in it. It's over.
Right. One of the things that I find so crazy is years, or rather, I can say the word decades of aircraft maintenance and mechanics and all of these roles and leadership and college education to podcast. And I'm not looking
Yeah.
down on you. I'm a podcaster as well, who has a nuclear, operation background. So I just think it's so interesting. I mean, what was the switch? It was kind of really just because of medical that when you went civilian, you're like, hey, I'm not going to go build airplanes for a civilian airline, or what was kind of like the process when you got out? Because you've mentioned some of the things that were obviously hindering you.
Well, I again I'd gone to school and I got lucky. My cousin years ago said, "Hey, when you get out of the airport," he worked at Sikorsky, and that's big in Connecticut. Pratt Whitney is big in Connecticut. So my cousin said, when you get out of the Air Force, you let me know. I'll help you get a job at Pratt Whitney or Sikorsky. And I'd gone to school, and I I called him up. I said, "Hey man, I'm getting out, and I could use your help." So no problem. So he helps get me an interview, and I was lucky enough to get hired at Pratt Whitney. It was, and again, I it was the job I'd kind of lined myself up for. I went to school for professional aeronautics. I had done everything I needed to do to get a job at a place like Pratt Whitney. I got a supply chain job, and I on the F-35 program, or the F-135 engine program that goes in the F-35 fighter. So it was a kind of a perfect timing because they were expanding the program rapidly to meet the demand. The timing couldn't have been better. And I always used the phrase like I walked through, I fell in shit and come up smelling like roses. That's the way it was. And I had a job, but I'm not even going to lie to you. The day I walked in, I went home and I was talking to my family. I'm still living with my sister. And how'd it go? I hate it. I hate it. I'm not going back tomorrow. And my mother was there. She was like, well, obviously you got to go back. And she was so cute. She was like, well, you got to do at least a week. And I said, Ma, no, I'm going back. And you got to do at least a year. That's what they tell you professionally, right? I said, I'm going back, but I just, it's not the same. I just don't like it. I'm in a cubicle. Everything is colored taupe. I don't like it.
Right,
So
compared
I
to
did
being
that.
on the line back in the
Yeah,
military, I mean, you were in a very different environment.
totally different. I did that for 10 years. And I told my wife a couple times. Now, the next 10 years it could be their own episode because I had a lot of ups and downs and a lot of significant mental health issues cropped up. Being a cancer survivor and a cancer patient are two different things. But I knew professionally that it was not what I wanted to do. But financially, it was very lucrative, and I mean it when I say I didn't think I was going to live for till retirement. So I got to make some money and take care of my family. And there's got to be some nest egg there for my daughter. If she's not going to get to grow up with me, then there's got to be something there. So let's make some money. It's a very safe environment and we'll be good. But I just didn't love it. And I did a couple different jobs at Pratt. I met amazing people, smart people. They took great care of me. And I had a cancer recurrence, which was another whole thing. But I finally, my wife and I, my mother passed away My wife retired from teaching because I subsequently married the wonderful woman I'd started dating. And my father-in-law was our last remaining parent. He was down in Florida, and I said, "Look, I'm working remote at Pratt, and now you're retiring from teaching because she just didn't want to teach anymore. Let's go live in Florida with your dad. Let's go enjoy him while he's alive and well and happy and healthy. Let's go live in Florida." And so we did. So in 2024, August of 2024, we moved to Florida. Again, I was still remote at Pratt, but I told my wife, give me like a year and then I'm going to leave Pratt. I got to do something, babe. I don't know what. And that's the scary part. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know that I'm not in the right spot. Like I feel it. Something's wrong. But I don't know what. Well, you try and convince your wife that you just want to leave and you don't know where you're going. That's a tough sell. But at some point, my wife finally was like, look, you're not happy. And Pratt is what you wanted, but it's what you thought you wanted. And it's not what you really want. So we got to Florida. We got settled in. And I told her, come December, I'm going to resign. And she said, okay, well, make me a promise. You're either going to write that book that you said you're going to write, or didn't you talk about wanting to do a podcast? And I was like, yeah, I actually did. She's like, start your podcast or write your book. And then I'm cool with you resigning. But that's it. Like, you're not going to stay home and be a loser. Okay. So that was, now I said, come December, right? This is in October. I had a conversation on Halloween with an old friend of mine who used to have a top 50 podcast called Beers and Brass Tacks. I worked with this guy and I called him. I said, hey, man, can you teach me, like, give me a half hour instruction on how to do a podcast? I mean, I didn't know anything. I'm not even being glib. All I had done was listen to podcasts. And so we taught for about an hour. And I know it was Halloween because he said, hey, man, I got to take my kids out trick or treating. But if you need anything else, you call me. Yeah. The very next day, my wife said, I got tickets to the Brew Fest in Stuart, Florida. I said, I don't even drink beer. Part of, like, after having a colon resection, I can't drink carbonated like
Mm.
beer. It hurts my stomach. So I don't really even drink beer. I said, well, we got to go meet some people. It's a beautiful Sunday or Saturday. Let's go out. We walk into Beer Fest. The very first tent I came to was the We Do Good tent. And they had a group in there that was promoting Military Creator Con. The first person I spoke to at this event was Adam Peters. And the second person I talked to, actually, I take that back. The first person I talked to was Mar-a-Lago. The second person I talked to was Adam Peters. And the third person in the tent was James Van Proyen. And they were like, so what are you here? Well, like, I said, what's Military Creator Con? I said, I'm actually toying with the idea of starting a podcast. And James is like, well, I can help you. And like, it was one of those, I don't know, man. You call it divine intervention, you
Right.
call it
If your
whatever you
wife
want, but
hadn't convinced you to go, and what are the chances? It's the whole military creator con team there. So
yeah, like the first person I talked to at a beer festival in Stewart is the
what's the
Military Creator
podcast?
Con people. Yeah. And
Yeah.
James, who's like, I can't even say enough. I don't want to, if I say what I really think about James, it's going to sound like I'm making it up. That dude and Mara, they're awesome, awesome, awesome human beings. Like, that dude was a coach, like, from ground zero. I was like, bro, I don't want to waste your time. I don't know jack about podcasting. And he said, that's why I'm here. I will tell you, I will teach you, I will give you everything I know. Just do you. He gave me if you do the homework, I'll grade it and give you new assignments. If you do the work, I'll help you out. I mean, that's in this world, that's all you can ask for, right? That's okay. So every week we'd get together, or every couple weeks, and what have you done? Well, here's what I did. I don't even want to show you. It's stupid. It's terrible. It's the worst. Well, and that's why I learned, like, that's how everybody starts. Everybody's first video and audio sucks. Nobody knows what they're doing. But you do it. You make a second one and you make a third one, and that was it. So yeah, that was how that worked. And so Lindsay looked up at me and was like, "You see?" And there's one. There's no. There's my wife is a amazing human, but there was no like. She just looked up at me like, "I told you that we should be here. I told you." And you're right, babe. You're right. You're almost always right. And that was November 1st. I went to Orlando's Podfest and met Shay Sparks and Adam Bird and a bunch of other just
Didn't see me there. I
awesome.
was there with a cowboy hat, but
I
yeah,
really,
we
I
didn't
did
meet.
not
I
know.
wasn't attending the event, but I went there to meet some contacts I knew. So I was like
Oh,
prowling around the front door, for lack of better words. There's a better word than
yeah,
prowling. I was walking,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah. So that's funny is that we were there but didn't meet. But then a
yeah,
few months later, we met at Military Creator Con. So
yeah, yeah. And that's the last couple months since then has just been one after another of those experiences. Like this is amazing. And so that's where we're at with the podcast. We're trying, but
yeah,
it keeps morphing because I keep meeting these people and like that's a great. I want to do that. I want to do this. I want to do. So that's why
yeah.
we're here.
Well,
Yeah.
you can always add on after you start. And then the one thing I want to say is, are you allowed to disclose the name yet? I mean, I got a peek at the name, but I don't know if you want to share that just yet, if you're still tweaking that.
So we initially, I'll give you the quick version. The name was absolutely beautiful. It was going to be Spirits of America, and we're going to go to. I want to do every 50 state, and it wasn't going to be whiskey specific or bourbon. Want to like Florida? I live in Florida. We got to do rum, right? We got to do. There's a couple special things in Florida besides rum that
Oh
people
yeah.
make here, and so that's what we wanted to go to all 50 states and talk to people and learn about the spirits that they make and why they make them and learn where the recipes come from. I don't care about the recipe, I care about the people behind it. Spirits of America was perfect. It was so perfect, in fact, that somebody else had used it. Not for what we're trying to use it for, but that name was closely taken. And so the lawyer advised us we can push forward with it. You may have Spirits of America podcast for years and never hear boo from them, or it might be an issue right away. So my partner and I decided, let's change it. Let's just start with something fresh, something totally
Mhm.
new. The problem is, we just it's been harder to come up with another name. So
Right.
we have a working title that I've been using with my projects because I saw, you know what? I'm not going to get tracked down with the name. Let's start building content. Let's go out and do some interviews. Let's practice, work on our equipment. I got to learn how to use my camera, better, and the name will come. But now, like, we've already did our first interview. We went to Kansas City and went to West Bottoms Whiskey, and I couldn't even tell us the name of the podcast because we just nothing fit as well as Spirits of America.
I
But so
totally
yeah,
get that. I've been working with a couple of different people trying to launch their podcasts, and each day it is more difficult to launch a new podcast in terms of name because so many people are making podcasts. And the saddest part is you'll have a great idea for a podcast name. Someone's already using it, but they pod faded. They stopped after like 3 episodes and they
yep,
dropped off years ago. And so it's sad, Luckily, I got lucky with a couple of nukes. No one was doing anything like that. So if you type up my podcast name, all my stuff pops up, and a bunch of news
yep,
articles about Iran right now, unfortunately. But
yeah, yeah, well,
so there's a
yeah,
yeah. But besides that, on the first like 3 pages of Google now, and that's just come with consistency. I mean, I hit 300 over 300 episodes now, about to start season
wow,
10.
that's
Or
awesome.
actually, I already started season 10. This episode will be part of season 10. And then, but it's been 3 years and some change. So, it really depends. But like you said, the content's more important than the name. You can always come back and
Yeah,
add that on. Definitely is interesting and funny to call a place. We'd love to have you on the podcast. Oh, what's the podcast? Well, it's not named yet, but we're making it. That's a
yeah, yeah.
conversation on its own. But yeah, definitely, I'll be promoting it on my platforms and everything, and maybe we'll have you back on or something. But were you gonna say you have a social media page already for it?
Yeah, I created like I have a website, I have Instagram, I have Facebook. and all of it under the spirits of America because I wanted to get ahead of it and make sure I locked it down, and then we found out later. So now, first rule of entrepreneurship: talk to a lawyer first before you. Now, Instagram, Facebook, and the website. Yeah, I spent $14. Okay, that's fine. I can come up with a new website, but because we didn't even build the website yet because it was right after. I just wanted to lock the name down. Instagram and Facebook I could change. But yeah, it's like we need to decide and go with it and then worry about content. But you can get lost in the details of, is it SEO friendly? Is it this? Is that? Let's focus on making real content and get that out there. But at some point, like we need a name because I can't have too many conversations. What's your podcast name? We don't have a name yet. It was funny the first time we were able to segue it into a joke on the podcast, but like I'm gonna have to come up with a real name because I really appreciate that your willingness to help us spread the word.
Oh
But
yeah,
I
for
need,
sure. Well, I plan
yeah,
on being a part of it. I want to go hit up some distilleries with you and some breweries. There's a lot. I mean, you mentioned Florida. I mean, I know a bunch of places in Jacksonville that have their own custom blend that only they make there and stuff. So I mean, you can never run out of content really. There's always someone, and even if you
yeah,
run out of all the professional businesses, I know so many people with their backyard distilleries that yeah, you might want to interview them anonymously, but
yeah, right. I know it's
yeah.
such a I love where art meets science and then splash history like that. When I went to school to learn how to brew beer, and that's what I kind of fell in love with was the art of beer, the cool bottle designs, the can labels, the graphics, the marketing. It's so clever and inventive, but the science behind the beer has to be sound. The same way with bourbons and whiskeys and spirits. Like you can kill people with a improperly distilled spirit. So, in addition to just producing something that tastes like crap, so your science has to be sound. As a nuke guy, you understand it's the science has to be sound. But then you splash in the art and the creativity and then the history, because I'm a history nerd, is like it's too much. It's too much to pass up. It's too good to pass up. And I can't wait. I look forward to having more conversations with you. I'm so proud of what you're doing and happy.
Thank you.
I feel it's so critical. My first idea for a podcast, I wanted to be the anti manosphere. I didn't even know that word existed, but I watched in my emotional and mental struggles. I started going on the YouTube vortex and following like Jordan Peterson's and some of the and Tony Robbins and some good content. And then I stumbled upon some terrible like crap that they're teaching young men and young
Mm.
people. But as a man, I like, oh my God, I can't imagine being 16-year-old version of me and coming upon Andrew Tate or something. And I like, this is awful. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, I'm going to make a podcast. I'm going to be the anti Andrew Tate podcast. I don't know if I don't care if a million people listen to me, if one person can hear me, right? It sounds cliche, but and
No,
that's
but
what
that's what it's
Lindsay's,
about. That's what I
yeah.
always
And
talk
so
about. It's
yeah,
not the
and when I
numbers, it's getting the episode to the right person at the right time, having that
100%.
impact. And, I have a ton of connections for you for different podcasts about masculinity. It's something I speak on a lot.
Yeah.
Toxic masculinity, biblical masculinity, overly effeminate masculinity. So it's definitely a conversation that you and I can have on my podcast in a
Yep.
different episode. And I know a bunch of shows that I've already been on or interviewed the host that would love to have that
Yep.
conversation with you as well. And it is very important because, masculinity isn't being taught primarily just in the home now. Like you said, there is an inundation of influences from mainstream media, social media, and then just real life social groups putting out all these different messages, a lot of them in alignment with the same thing, which is the wrong thing. And I
Yep.
literally had met two people this week where one of them, when they were 11 years old, their father introduced them to pornography as a father-son bonding activity. And a different gentleman
Oh,
at 16, his father bought him a prostitute for his birthday. So you and I have plenty to talk about when it comes to
yeah.
fathering, when it comes to masculinity, military perspective, civilian perspective, from the perspective of children of abusive homes. We could have a whole episode on that. So
Yeah.
this isn't your it is your first, but it's not your
Yeah.
last episode on this show for sure.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear. Because I feel like I talked a lot about myself. I guess that was the point today, but yeah, there's so much more. Again, you were introduced to me as Mr. Whiskey, and oh, that makes sense. And we talked about the bourbon clubs, but then when you actually said what your podcast was about, again, it was one of those like, of all the people that you could meet, that this is one of the people, and this is what your podcast is about, like literally trying to help people and navigate this. As like you can try and dismiss that as a coincidence, but I don't know, man. I felt like there's something deeper. There's a movement here. The tides are swelling, and I just got to go with it and press on. I could not have foreseen this. This again, I when I say I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something. I'm being genuine. I knew that I wasn't in the right spot, and I saw a destination that I wanted, but let's go there. And then again, meeting people like you with the mission that you're on, I don't know. It's
I think you're
this
going to
is yeah.
find there's much more to the podcasting world than you imagine, as you have already begun to discover. And I'm super excited to see some of the connections you make and your journey. I want to thank you for your time today. For this is one of your first steps, guesting on a podcast, and you'll really learn how to tell and what to tell as you go along. I look back at my first episodes that I guested on compared to the latest ones, and I'm like, who was that guy?
Yeah, yeah.
You really become such an expert in your craft, and I'm excited to see the launch of your podcast. So, I'll be keeping everyone on my end updated, and I know you'll be updating everyone on your end. So, we'll be talking again real soon. But for today, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for sharing your overview. A lot of parts of your story are very relatable to people. Their experiences that many are going through, maybe in a similar but different capacity. And you've talked a little bit about what it kind of took to get through those and some of the realizations that you've had. So thank you for your insight, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm so happy to have met you. Thank you for having me. I hope that again, it's my first time being a guest. So hopefully I wasn't too embarrassing. Thank you so much.